So welcome to day 2 and lab 21, Web API. So let me put a very simple and unofficial definition around this word Web API. Web API is a technology which respects and follows HTTP protocol, and by doing so it makes your web architecture simple. And if you are really keen to hear the official and complicated word, it is nothing but it is REST. Web API implements REST architecture. But the simple definition around Web API is that it's a technology which respects HTTP protocol and makes your architecture simple. So let us try to understand that how this Web API makes our architecture simple. So in order to understand that how Web API will simplify our architecture, let us first quickly go and revise how our current architecture is. So if you look at our current architecture, we have the customer controller, and the customer controller has various methods here. For example, it has get customers to get the customer from the database. It has submit to submit the customer to the database. So it has this various actions here which helps us to perform CRUD operation on the customer database. And these actions, that is get customers and submit, are called from Angular. Now, if you remember, I had given an unofficial word to this Angular code as Angular classes. So these Angular classes actually take data from these controllers in JSON format, and later this data is attached to the HTML UI. So we have three important components in our current architecture. One is we have the HTML UI, then we have the Angular, and then Angular talking with the controllers in the JSON format. So now let us try to zoom in on the communication between Angular view model classes and the MVC controller. So now let us say Angular wants to get data from the customer controller class. He makes an HTTP get call on the get customers function. If the Angular class wants to post data, he has to make an HTTP post call on the submit action. Again, I repeat this sentence. It is very important to understand this sentence. If the Angular class wants to get data from the customer controller, he makes an HTTP get call on the get customers action. And if the Angular class wants to send data to the server or add data onto the server, he makes an HTTP post call on the submit action. Now pause for a moment, look at the diagram on the screen and think logically. Are we making things duplicate here? Are we making things redundant here? In other words, if you see here, we are saying HTTP post and then calling the submit action. We are saying HTTP get and then we are calling the get customers action of the controller. Now HTTP get means that we have to get the data from the server. HTTP post means we want to actually add data to the server. So why do we need to have different custom action names again? So is it possible that our controller starts acting smart? The time he gets an HTTP get call from the client, now client here means the Angular class, he understands that he has to send data to the client. The time he gets an HTTP post call, he understands that this is a post, and that means the client wants to add data to the server. So if the controller can start understanding the HTTP post, get, put and these calls, that would really make our controller much simpler. And think about the client now. The client also does not have to worry about that it is get customers or it is submit action. He says that there is a customer resource somewhere on the server, somewhere on the web. And he just says that if he wants to get data, he will make HTTP get call. If he wants to add data, he will make an HTTP post call. So if both client and the server start respecting the HTTP protocol, the communication between both of these entities can really simplify things, and that would really simplify our architecture as well. Now this concept is termed as REST. This concept of respecting HTTP protocol, thinking like a resource, post and get is termed as REST. REST stands for representational state transfer. Now I will not go into in-depth of REST here and the principle of REST. What I would suggest is that in WCF we have two great videos which explains what exactly is REST and how to implement in WCF. Remember, REST is a principle. Now this principle you can implement by using Web API, which I am showing in this video. In that video, I have shown that how can you implement REST by using WCF service.
So what I would suggest is, in order to understand the fundamentals of REST, please go and see those two videos of WCF, where I've explained what exactly is WCF REST and how we can implement WCF REST using WCF. Okay. So in this video, we will be seeing that how we can implement REST by using Web API. So now, in order that our controller follows REST principles, it obeys HTTP protocol, we cannot inherit from this simple controller class. We need to go and create a Web API controller. So let us click on this controllers folder here. Let us say add, and let us go ahead and select controller and then select Web API controller empty. So if you just create a normal controller like this by using MVC5 controller, then that does not become a REST-based controller. But if you're going to use Web API, then it becomes a REST-based controller. So let us click on this Web API to controller empty, and we'll say add. And let us give name here as, let us say, customer new. So this customer, or we'll say customer. Okay, actually we already have a customer controller. So we'll say this is customer Web API, add. So you can see that he has created the customer Web API controller class here. And if you watch very closely, this class inherits from the API controller class. And if you remember your previous controller classes, they were inheriting from the controller class. So this API controller class makes this class very special, and it makes it follow the REST principles, or it actually helps it to follow the HTTP protocol principles. So now, rather than going and creating your own custom methods like insert customer, get customer, delete customer, we can just use post, get, put, and delete. So for example, if you want to go and add customer to the database, what you can do is you can just say here public. So public void post customer. Definitely, if you want to use the customer object here, we have to first go and import the models. PJ. And in this post action, let me go and copy the code of submit. So if you remember right, in the previous controller code, in the previous customer controller code, in the submit, it was adding to the database, right? So I'm going to go and take this code here. I'm going to go and copy this code here, Control C this code, and I'm going to put it here in this post here. Okay, so there it goes. Now this post here, this HTTP post method here of the Web API is called from this enter customer screen. If you remember, we had created an enter customer screen, and in that we had a add button. So when you call the add customer button, he actually goes and makes a HTTP post, right? Sends data, and once the data is added to the database by using the entity framework classes, he returns a customer collection, and this customer collection is then displayed in this table over here, right? And the customer collection which comes out, from the server, it has to be a format of JSON. So if you remember, afterwards, when we get the list of customer from the entity framework collection, we are actually converting it to a JSON format. But in Web API, we don't have to return this JSON. We don't have to return the JSON format, because we have a concept here called as content negotiation. Let me explain you what exactly is this thing called as content negotiation. Content negotiation is a process where the server identifies what kind of format the client supports, and depending on the comfort of the client, he sends that format. Now the next question which will come to your mind is, how does the client communicate to the server what kind of format it supports? Now there is a thing called as accept request header. This accept request header is sent through the HTTP post or HTTP get. So via this parameter, the client tells to the server which format it supports. So now when the client makes a call to the server, when he makes a HTTP post call or a get call, he sends the content type in a format of a main type and a subtype. Means the client sends text/HTML, application/XHTML, or application/XML, or image/JPG, or image/GIF. In other words, from the client side, the client says that, okay, the main type is image and the subtype which I support is JPG. The main type is text. The subtype which I support is HTML. And what the server does is server interprets these types, and depending on these types, he sends the output. So web API, which I'm calling server at this moment, interprets this content and says that, okay, you support JSON, fine, I will send you JSON. Or you support image, I will send you image type. So this is termed as content negotiation. In other words, web API does content negotiation. So we don't have to say here return JSON or return action result or return HTML. That will happen by itself depending on the accept data what is coming from the client. So over here I will say just return him a list of customer. Return him a list of customer and let web API decide how this list will be displayed depending on the content type. So I will just say a return customers call. You can see now I'm not saying a return JSON. I'm just saying return data. Now that data can be customer, it can be string, it can be supplier, and the content type will be decided by the web API. In the same way, we have a get customers function here. If you remember this get customers action, it actually gets all the customer from the database. So what we'll do is we will go and copy this code. And in web API, now we don't have to say here get customers or search customers. What we have to say here, only get. So over here, let me go and create a HTTP get here. So this get will actually help me to get customers. And again, we don't have to say return JSON or anything. That will be decided by the content type. So we have to just say here return customers call. Now, when we added this controller class, that is the API controller class into your project, it created one more file here called as the web API config.cs file. So in the global.asx, we need to go and invoke this register method of the web API config file. Okay, so in the global.cs here, we need to go and say that please go and call the register method of web API.config. Okay, and ensure that this global configuration.configure should be called before the route config.register routes is called. Okay, so in case you put a sequence here up and down, it can cause problems. And you can see that there is a red sign here. So this red sign indicates that you also need to have a reference to system.web.http namespace. So let us do that. Great. Now we have two controller classes or two kinds of customer controller classes. One which inherits from the web API class. So this class, this customer web API controller class, it helps us to implement REST, that is HTTP post, HTTP get, and those principles, right? And the other one is our old customer controller class, which uses that normal controller. Okay. So what we'll do for now is let us go ahead and comment this class here so that we can just concentrate on web API at this moment. So I'm going to go and comment this class here, and here I will go and change this class name to customer controller. Okay. And let me go and build this. So let me build the solution to just check if there are any errors. So let us go and run this. So I'm going to go and hit this get over here. So let me go and invoke one of the actions of this customer controller what we have. Now remember, the way routing is registered for the web API, it is like this. The template of the route is you have to say API and then the controller name. If you remember, when we were using our normal controller, we have to just say the server name / controller name / action name. But here we don't have any action, right? The action is nothing but your post, get, put, delete, whatever happens from HTTP, right? So you can see here it is only API / controller name. Okay. So for example, over here now, so in order to go and invoke this get, I have to say here HTTP localhost / API / customer. Now we don't have to type get. When I press enter, HTTP get is already happening. So what it will do is when I do enter here, it will automatically go and execute this part of the code. And by doing so, we should be able to see the customer data on the screen. There you can see the customer data on the screen, and you can see that this complete data is in XML format. Now think for a while. Why is web API sending out XML? Okay, because remember I said, so if you do a Control Shift I, So very quickly, let me do a Control Shift I, and if I press enter here, because if you go to the network here, because when the request was made, he said that the Chrome browser said that he understands text/HTML or application/XHTML. So because he understands XML, that's why he sent XML to him. So depending on this accept here, the content type, he actually sent him this response. But now take this, do a Control C and try to run this on Internet Explorer. So let me go and run this on Internet Explorer. So I'm going to go and do a Control V here. If you see over here, if I do enter here, he sends out JSON. So if you see this output here, I'm going to go and save this file. And if I open this in Notepad, this response what is sent in Notepad, you will see that the response is JSON. Remember, content negotiation, right? So if you see, because here in Chrome he's saying that the accept headers can only understand XML, so he sends XML. While in Internet Explorer, he's sending JSON, so he's actually sending him JSON here. Okay, so depending on the client, the web API makes smart decisions. So now when clients like jQuery or Angular or Knockout, they make a call to the server, they always expect JSON format. So in that accept headers, you will always find it is application/JSON. Okay, so if a call is made from JavaScript, a web API will always give him JSON. Now the next thing is our Angular customer view model class should start hitting this customer controller which is following web API. So if you remember, right, our customer.js file, which is the customer view model class, should now start hitting that customer web API rather than calling this submit, get customers action or get customer by name action. So it should actually hit API/customer. So now we need to go and replace these individual action names, by just saying API/customer. So you can see here we are saying API/customer post. So this will do an insert. When we say API/customer get, this will do a search. So basically, now we don't have to say get customer by name, get customers, post customer, insert customer. It is just customer. And then depending on it is a post or a get, he will do the necessary thing, right? Great. But now we also need to go and invoke the UI. So if you remember, all these Angular files are loaded into this UI here called as enter customer, right? So we need to somehow go and load this UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back again to my customer controller class, or old one, and I'm going to go and uncomment it. I'm going to go and uncomment this. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go and I'm not going to use the methods of the methods which actually send out data in JSON format. Those methods I'm going to go and comment it. So all of these methods I'm going to comment it. So these methods are going to get commented out. So I'm going to go and comment all of these methods. Okay. And the only method which I want to uncomment is the method which invokes the enter customer UI. I'm not able to find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go and write here the code to invoke enter customer, right? So I'm going to go and create an action here called as enter customer, and this action will actually go and invoke my view enter customer.cshtml. Okay, so there it is. I will remove the authorize attribute for now. So let me go and build this. You can see that he has popped up an error here saying that you have two class names with the name customer controller. So if you remember, we had the web API name as customer controller and we had our normal customer controller as customer controller. Okay, so what I'll do is, because this customer controller here is now invoking my UI, I'll say that this is customer UI controller, which actually invokes the UI. And this one, which is just customer controller, which it actually gives out my data in the JSON format or in whatever format. So this customer controller is for the data, and this customer UI controller is for user interfaces. Now, if I'm going to go and change this name to customer UI, then I need to also ensure that my folder name, that is this name, should change to customer UI, right? So I have to say that this is customer UI. Okay, good. So now let me go and build this application once again to ensure that we do not have any kind of errors. And it looks to me that we do not have errors. Good. So let me do a Control F5 and let us go and run this application. So all our user interfaces is in this customer UI controller, and all our data is in the customer controller. Okay, so I'm going to say here, so first thing is I need to go and invoke the UI, right? So UI, right? So I'm going to say here customer UI / enter customer. So that will go and invoke my page, and internally he will go and call the customer controller. So we should be able to see the data here. If you remember, I had put a thread.sleep or something, so it is taking time, and there it is, you can see now. Good, right? Let us go in the debug mode and let us see how it looks like. So I'm going to go and put a debug point on this post here, and also I'm going to go and put a debug point on this get here. Okay, and let me go and do a debug run. So first thing is I will go and do a enter on this customer enter here. So now what happens is, the first thing, it makes a get. So if you remember right, in our customer view model, if you remember, that is our customer.js file. If you remember, as soon as the object is loaded, he actually goes and calls this load method, and which makes a get. So this get call here to this customer controller here actually goes and makes a call here, you can see. So this is now doing a get. Okay. So once this data is displayed here, so if I want to go and add some data here, so if I, let's say I go and add some data here, 1420 and something amount, okay, and I say add customer, so this makes a post. So as soon as I do that, you can see now he's calling the post here of my web API. So you can see now, rather than having those method names, right, or individual method names, I'm utilizing the HTTP protocol. So I'm looking at the HTTP protocol, and my API is saying, okay, so you're doing a post, let me do an insert. You're doing a get, let me get you results, right? So by doing so, it makes our architecture more simpler. Now, let me summarize what we have ended up with. And let me tell you in one word that we are literally entering the heaven. Because what we have ended up here with is, we have the UI, which is in HTML. He calls the Angular view model classes. The Angular view model classes do a get and a post to the server. And on the server, we have this intelligent web API class, which receives and sends data using JSON. And this web API class is lightweight and it is simple because it understands HTTP, because it understands HTTP post and get, because it understands the HTTP accept request headers, right? So you can see now our architecture is a lot of client-side JavaScript, and on the server side, we have this web API to supply data. And this architecture, what you are currently seeing now, or what you have coded now, is the future of web architecture. The future of web architecture is a lot of client-side JavaScript. So on the client side, you will have JavaScript. Now this JavaScript will be using frameworks like Knockout. It will be using frameworks like Angular. And the display part and the positioning part will be done by using HTML. And on the server side, we will have a data provider like Web API. Now please note that this word data provider is unofficial. Okay, it is coming from me. But I mean to say that on the server side, we will have something like Web API, which will provide data to the client. And this data will be provided in a format of JSON. Now, the beauty of this whole architecture is, it does not matter what kind of data provider you will have at the backend. At the backend, you can have data provider in .NET. At the backend, you can have data provider in Java or PHP. But the client-side JavaScript will talk only using JSON. and the data provider will respect HTTP protocol. He will use smartly those accept headers to send proper data type. Now let me spend 5 minutes here talking about how this HTTP protocol is implemented in a very wrong way in many of the projects. Because if you look at the HTTP protocol, it looks very simple. It has simple post, get, put, delete, those kind of actions. But because of this simplicity, many times it is implemented in a very, very wrong way. For example, if you remember, we had this search screen here. Okay, and this search screen actually helps us to search by using the customer name. Now, if you visualize this search screen here, this search screen can be implemented by using a post as well, by using a get as well. And if you remember right, this search screen at this moment is implemented by using a post. So if you remember right, we had this method here in our Angular class called as load by name. And this load by name method was called in the search screen. So in the search screen here, when somebody clicks on this button here, it actually goes and calls that load by name. And that load by name was actually making a post. So you can either make a post here, you can also make a get, because you can pass data from both. You can pass data by using a post as well. You can pass data by using a get as well. So now the question is that what is logical? Should I use a post? Should I use a get? Should I use a put? Or should I use a delete? Now in this video, I will not be going into details of how post is different from a get, how get is different from a put and delete. My suggestion is to go and watch the video in the ASP.NET questions and answers section, where I've explained all of these 4 methods of HTTP in a very clear way. But here, I would like to make a small statement so that, for this application, we can quickly make a decision and we can move ahead. When you pass data by using the HTTP post action, your intention is that you want to save that data. When you pass data from a get action, your intention is that that data is a query data. You don't intend to persist it. So when I pass data from HTTP get, it is like a search criteria. It says that, okay, get customer by name, get customer by code. So it is actually a get. So in this case now, because I'm going to go and search the customer and I don't intend to save this customer name, this action should be a HTTP get. So in other words, here, this load by name should actually be a get call. And because this customer name, what we are passing for searching, that is this customer name here, is a search criteria, it's a query criteria. The best way to pass query data in a get call is by using query string. So rather than doing this, rather than passing the data through the body, right, we would like to go and pass the data via query string. So in query string, you send the data by using this question mark here. So here I'll say customer name is equal to $scope dot. So very quickly here I will say $scope dot customer dot. My property name was customer name. So $scope dot customer name. Okay, so there it is, dot customer name. So if you see this code here, you can see now the data is now passed via the query string. So we also need to go and make now a couple of changes on the server. So on the web API controller here, we already have a get, right? But this get is an empty get. The other get which we need to create is get by customer name. So string customer name. Now remember that this variable name here, customer name, should be the same as a query string name. For example, here in the customer.js file, you can see that there is customer name. So this variable name here should be the same name as a query string name. So here we need to go and write the link query to go and search by customer name. So I'll say here from t in dal.customers. Remember the word flows. Okay. So from where t dot customer name is equal to whatever customer name has been passed, right? And select t and then make it to list of customer. That's it. So now if I do a control F5, let me go and just test. So here I will say customer UI / search customer. So that is a screen. You can see now the data is loaded, and if I go and type Shiv, it actually searches by Shiv. So you can see now this thing here is now using a get call. So if you do a control shift I, just to monitor how the calls are made internally. So if I do a control shift I, and if you search at the back end, right? So if you see the network, you can see now this is a get call. So you can see now this is a get call and the values are passed via query string. So it is very important, that when you're using this HTTP actions, you have to use them appropriately. So sometimes, when you look at a screen, you would think that this can be achieved by using a post as well. This can be achieved by using a get as well. But just remember this golden rule. You will use post when you want to persist data to the server, like adding it to a SQL server or Oracle or something. You will use get when you want to get data from the server, but you don't want to go and save that data into the server. Now, just a quick note before I end this session. In this session, I created the web API class manually because we already had a project, and the way this class is moving ahead is actually revolving around the project. So we did not have a lot of options, and we had to create that web API controller class manually. But in real-time projects or in professional projects, you would be using the web API template to create this class. So let me quickly go and demo the same. So in order to use the template, you can go and click on File New Project. So click on File New Project. And as we have already said in the first video of this series, that everything is now one ASP.NET. So it's either your old web forms, it's either MVC, or it is either web API. All of this actually belongs to ASP.NET. So click on web here, and you can see that single template here, that one ASP.NET. So click on that, give some name and say OK. And this is the template here, web API. And if you read the instruction carefully at the right hand side, it says a project template to create RESTful services. Okay, RESTful HTTP services. That means, if you're going to go and use web API, it's going to follow the HTTP principles. It's going to follow post, get, put, delete, those kind of things. So I'm going to just go and say OK here. So once the project is created, you can see the project structure here. And the interesting part would be to see the controller files. You can see that there are two kinds of controller files here. One is the home controller.cs and the other one is the values controller.cs. If you click on the home controller.cs, you will see that this is your normal controller class. So this controller class here, this home controller, actually inherits from the controller class. So this class will help you to invoke your user interfaces, right? And you can see the other one, the values controller.cs. This is the class which is for web API. You can see that it has been inherited from the API controller, and it has all those methods, that is get, post, put, delete, and those things. You can see at the right hand side those methods, and you can see here as well all those methods. So if you use this template, you don't have to go and do those things manually. So you don't have to go and create your API controller manually. You don't have to write the get and post. You get a template and you can start coding inside that template. Now here's a request. We have started a new section in Learn MVC 2-day series called as the reference section. This reference section is for references purpose, and they are marked with the word ref. So we have added two videos, which is recorded by Mr. Sukesh sir, which is on web API. In that, the first video is the theory video, which explains what is web API, and the next video uses the web API template and demonstrates how to create a REST-based service. So both of these videos will add more knowledge to your web API. So must be you can go and refer those videos and increase your web API knowledge. So that brings us to the end of lab 21. And we have more 7 hours and 30 minutes still pending. But if you look at the outcome of lab 21, it is awesome. We have ended up with a more better architecture, where we have a data provider, which you can term formally as web API. He communicates using the HTTP protocol. He follows those post, get, put, delete, those kind of actions. He does content negotiation. He communicates using JSON format or XML format depending on the content negotiation. And then we have the customer view model class, the JavaScript class, which is created in Angular. And he's like a bridge between the data provider and your HTML UI. And the HTML is there to show the user interface, do alignment, do positioning, etc. So we have ended up with a very, very professional architecture at this moment, and that's really good. Now the next video is going to be on error handling, which will be conducted by Mr. Sukesh sir. Now when it comes to error handling, most of the .NET developers stick to their try and catch finally and those kind of error handling mechanism, and definitely that is the fundamental way to handle errors. But when you're working with frameworks like MVC, WCF, what they do is they add more value on the try and catch and improve the error handling mechanism. So in the next video, Mr. Sukesh sir is going to demonstrate how we can handle errors in a more elegant and multiple way in MVC. So again, before I end this session, a very small request here. I know that I'm repeating this after every video, but I think it's very important for us as a trainer to know that till what level people are following our videos. So what you can do is you can go to facebook.com/questpond, and as you complete one lab, you can say that I have completed this lab, I liked it, or I did not like it, or what issues I had. So if you see here already, a lot of people have started posting. For example, if you go to our post to page, right, you will see that already people are saying I completed lab 18, I completed lab 20, I'm feeling positive. By this kind of messages, it helps us to understand that till what lab you are following, and in what way we can improve. So do go to facebook.com/questpond and do say that yes, you have completed lab 21, you have completed lab 20, etc. Thank you so much.